Colin Sutton is a former investigator with Scotland Yard. He has repeatedly explored the Praia de Luz area where Madeleine disappeared. How difficult would it be to find a body in that area around Praia de Luz?
It's almost impossible. It would be impossible without specific information or intelligence which enabled you to focus the search in a particular area.
You visited the area. Where on earth could Madeleine's body be?
It was the most hide-a-bodyable place I've ever been in my life.
That's one school of thought. The other is that Madeleine is still alive. If she is alive and someone sees her, or indeed if Madeleine looks in the mirror and suddenly realizes one day she's Madeleine, what should she do?
If people see somebody they think could possibly be Madeleine, who should they call?
You should call the police, local police. You know, if they really think it is Madeleine and it gets addressed there and then, it's actually quite difficult if you get information coming in historically about sightings. So
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. People ask why we go on, and the answer is that we still have hope, real hope. Madeleine is still alive until someone proves otherwise, and as we know, there is no evidence whatsoever to suggest she has come to any harm, other than as a result of being separated from her family. That's an excerpt from the book Madeleine, Our Daughter's Disappearance and the Continuing Search for Her by Kate McCann. I'm not sure if one can say there is no evidence whatsoever to suggest she has come to any harm. I would say that there's arguably a little bit of evidence. There were those dog alerts, right? And so I'm not sure if one can say no evidence whatsoever. It reminds me of what Amanda Knox says. There's absolutely no evidence of me. There's a difference between insufficient evidence and absolutely no evidence. In this analysis, I want to deal with the idea that if Madeleine is still alive, and we know Madeleine's family still believe she is alive, well, in practical terms, how receptive are they to this idea? If the real Madeleine is out there and she tried to get in touch, would the McCanns welcome her with open arms? But how could she prove who she was? And then stay tuned until late in this analysis, because I also want to draw some chilling comparisons between the Gus Lamont case and Madeleine McCann. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Meanwhile, just a quick shout out to Paddy McFarland for your super thanks. Thanks very much. That was actually for a video on the John Benet Ramsey case, and then also thanks to OCD EHR48. Thanks very much for your contribution. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, and I must say I put a lot of effort into this one, really took hours and hours of research, well, please do show your appreciation. And let's get started. So, what I think is quite interesting and worth noting is that Kate initially didn't want to do a DNA test with Julia, because she was certain it wasn't her from photographs, and the request felt like emotional manipulation. But then later on she had second thoughts, and she thought she almost wanted to do the test. Now, I'm not actually sure if she did ultimately do the test, and I think regardless of whether tests were done, I'm talking about on the McCann side, I think if we acknowledge that there was a certain reluctance to do DNA tests, is that a fair thing to say? That there seemed to be a certain reluctance. There certainly wasn't an enthusiasm and urgency to do it, right? Do you agree with that? And if you take that and just sort of see that in a nutshell, then we can say Julia Wandelt encountered this reluctance to do DNA tests. Well, if the real Madeleine came along, would she encounter the same thing? And I want to put this into the perspective of the reality, which is, remember the McCann said, we're doing everything we can, Madeleine, to find you, and there are so many good and very kind people helping us. be brave, sweetheart. Now, if you think about that sentiment, we're doing everything we can. Well, what about someone comes along and says, I'm Madeleine? Well, can you do everything you can to find out either if it is her or if it isn't her? Well, one obvious way is to do a DNA test, right? That's a way to speed up the whole process. And meanwhile, Kate says she almost wanted to do it, and she wasn't certain whether she should do it. Is that we're doing everything we can? One aspect I found a little surprising is if someone has been missing for 18 years and you've been dreaming about them, and we know that Kate did have dreams about Madeleine. She mentions it in her book. There's the turning point dream and the whole narrative around that. But, you know, there's a hole in your heart. People who have lost people close to them know this feeling all too well. I must say, I know that feeling. Surely if there's a possibility that someone is actually alive, and, you know, if that someone came up to you and said, it's me, wouldn't you sit down and want to examine it? I mean, why would you not want to? Now, let's be fair. When the idea of parents acknowledging long-lost progeny is dramatized, it's invariably intense. It's invariably dramatic. It's invariably loaded with denial. Let's have a look at a couple of examples.
It's you.
How long do you people have to spy on me before you realize there is no story here?
Sorry, I think you've got the wrong idea.
Tell it to the authorities. You know, the real scandal is how young they're starting, you gutter snipe. You sit down there and tell me who sent you. The Sun? The Daily Star?
As I said, intense, dramatic, and loaded with denial.
I am your father.
No! According to this, I'm your daughter too.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Seems you had an even better time in Morocco than you let on.
Oh, dear God.
I have it.
And I guess that's what I'm getting at. When there is a genuine blood relationship, how does one go about acknowledging that?
Who are you?
I am your father, Cal. Or at least a shadow of it.
That's impossible. That's impossible. Who are you?
All right, so according to the Border Telegraph, Janet Kennedy, who's Kate McCann's aunt, Madeleine's great-aunt, told the Leicester Crown Court she could not accept that Julia Wandelt, 24, was her missing great-niece, adding that the essential person that Madeleine was not there. Fair enough, but that's not evidence. Imagine if Clark had told Jarrell, I'm sorry, but the essential person that's my dad just isn't there. What's he supposed to say? Back to the Telegraph, giving evidence on Friday, Mrs. Kennedy said Wandelt confronted her and gave her an envelope with information that would prove she was Madeleine during the yearly gathering in Rothley, Leicestershire on May 3rd last year. Now, to me, what's interesting about this is the idea that someone is actually handing over evidence. I'm not saying it's valid or credible, but it's not just a case that someone makes merely a verbal claim. And so Mrs. Kennedy responds by saying, I was rather stunned by her approach. I looked at her and thought, she's not Madeleine. So that's how snap the judgment is. I looked at her and I thought, she's not Madeleine. There's just no way she could be Madeleine at all. Why not? She looked at her and decided she's not Madeleine. There's just no way. In this dramatization, how reasonable would it be if the father figure here simply refused to look at the document he was being handed?
I am your daughter. You're not my daughter!
Sorry about that. Not that one, this one.
I'm your daughter too.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Seems you had an even better time in Morocco than you let on.
Reading between the lines, and it is possible that I missed something, that the reporting didn't include this, but it seems at no point does Madeleine's great-aunt say, I opened the envelope and ... Instead, she says, I think one's recognition of someone is something that is intuitive. You just know the person. The essential person that Madeleine was not there. And that change of tense is also quite interesting. The person that Madeleine was not there. Now, if all that was necessary for someone to prove that they were Madeleine was someone's intuition and not something more than that, I think there would be real problems, wouldn't there, in this case? Even when it comes to matters of the heart, like marrying someone, intuition alone isn't enough. There needs to be some gesture, some action, some information, some kind of track record that proves more is going on than just talk, which is why when you marry someone, there's a ring and a marriage contract and witnesses and photos and kind of a commitment and an investment. Back to the article, even though Madeleine was nearly 4 when she was abducted, and now I'm meeting someone 17 years later, the essential person would still be recognizable, even though the years had moved on. Really? When Julia said she was Madeleine, with the color of your skin, you are Polish. There are distinct differences in the way people look according to where they are from. And the eyes as well. The eyes did not look like Madeleine's eyes, so I could not accept that. Mrs. Kennedy told the court that she took the letter and kept it until Mrs. McCann, who refused to read it, felt ready to be able to look at it. Now, remember that statement that I read earlier. We're doing everything we can, Madeleine, to find you. And you might say it's unfair when someone like this hands you an envelope to not open it, but you could quickly deal with it. You could quickly open it and say, okay, I see what you're saying. I'm sorry, I don't think this is valid or whatever, and kind of deal with it there and then. And the witness continued, eventually it would have been towards the end of that year I did dispose of it. I tore it up. Really? Did she tear it up without even reading it? Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not an apologist for Julia. I don't believe she's Madeleine, and I've never believed she was, or even that there was the slightest chance that she was Madeleine. So I'm not trying to make a case here for why she should be listened to or treated in a certain way. I'm really making the case for if a genuine Madeleine did come along, what chance would she have of being heard? And what is she supposed to do in order to be listened to? Is someone going to just look at her and instantly recognize her? Interestingly, in the John Benet Ramsey case, there have been people who say Erica Kirk, Charlie Kirk's wife, is actually John Benet Ramsey. There's another one that says Katy Perry is John Benet Ramsey. And I guess that is the public's intuition. It doesn't really make sense because John Benet was found and buried. She's buried in a graveyard in Atlanta, Georgia. Even so, in this case, I would have thought a simple DNA test then and there, and perhaps even a press conference from a family representative or the police could have quickly and easily settled the matter once and for all. The article goes on to note, explaining why he phoned the defendant, D.C. Draycott said, to reassure her she was not Madeleine McCann, I explained we had gone over all the material and used our professional expertise to confirm she was not Madeleine McCann. And so what is that professional expertise? Intuition. She actually said she was relieved not to be Madeleine McCann, but that wasn't all that she said. You're one of many, I'm going to say hundreds of people that say they are Madeleine McCann. You have had treatment for many years for mental health. When D.C. Draycott said, if you cause any harassment, you could be arrested, Wandelt is heard to reply, is this blackmail? Now, what is also interesting and an added dimension to this is the idea that it was a pastor at the vigil who basically listened to Julia's petition and basically brokered the meeting with Madeleine's great aunt. So the pastor basically seemed to humor her and basically take the whole thing seriously to the extent that he introduced her to the great aunt. Now, according to the Daily Mail, the pensioner, that's Kennedy, arranges the annual vigil in the center of their home village, which takes place every year on May 3rd to mark the anniversary of her disappearance. She added that last year Kate and Jerry unusually didn't attend as they were away on a break, but that at the end of the service she was approached by the minister of the Baptist church where the vigil had been held to say that someone was there who wanted to speak to a family member. And that's when Wandelt confronted her and gave her an envelope with information that would prove she was Madeleine. Interestingly, even the police in 2022 seemed confident and happy to prove that Julia wasn't Madeleine, not using science or evidence, but intuition. Detective Constable Draycott said in 2022 there were just 4 detectives in Operation Grange. He described the team as very small. Under cross-examination from Tom Price, who was defending Wandelt, he said they quickly decided she was not Madeleine after studying photos she sent them and comparing the photos with the missing girl and assessing the information she sent through.
Wow, I just got a big headache.
It's also pretty incredible how the Daily Mail used this photo of Julia in their article. I mean, I doubt whether there's a less flattering photo of the young Polish woman. And that brings us to chilling comparisons between the Gus Lamont case and Madeleine McCann. Speaking of photos, one thing I can't help noticing is a similarity in the Gus Lamont case and the Madeleine McCann case. One thing I find odd with the Gus Lamont case is the fact that more than 3 weeks later, only a single photo of Gus has been released, this photo. You really want a handful of photos, including full-length photos of him, to improve the chance of him being recognized. It's really quite impressive that for all the desperation and despair to find this little boy, for all the efforts, for all the people on the ground searching for him, only this one single photo has been released. Aren't there other photos, and if there are, why not release them? It's possible that the searchers have been shown other photos that we haven't. But I think the issue still stands. Why is it that such a tight lid is being held over something as obvious when you're searching for someone as photos of that person? And then look at this article from The Sun. Beyond the grave, JonBenet Ramsey smiles in haunting final pic. But look at the date, 12 April 2019. This last photo of JonBenet was only released in April 2019, which means it was held back for around 23 years. It was taken on the night of her death, and it's one of the least attractive, least happy photos of the child beauty queen. Yes, she looks pale and she's not smiling in this haunting final image. When Madeleine disappeared, the McCanns originally released this photo of Madeleine, and it was this photo that was initially printed on wanted posters. And about a year ago, I made a video exploring this question: why were searchers initially given this picture? I'll put a link to that video in the description. But this isn't even a picture of Madeleine from her holiday. Yeah, her hair is brown, not blonde, and she looks a lot younger than the almost 4-year-old toddler we see in pictures from her holiday. On the 5th of May, another photo was published in the Mirror that was hardly any better. This photo is arguably the default Find Madeleine image. It was used by David Beckham more than a week after the incident, somewhere on or around May 11th, during his appeal to find Madeleine. It was also used for the cover of the McCann's book. And yet Madeleine didn't look anything like this when she disappeared. Why would you use photos of Madeleine with shorter brown hair, a younger Madeleine, to give to the international press to be plastered everywhere, instead of photos of Madeleine from the resort, from Portugal, from the very last days of her life? It wasn't as if the McCanns didn't have a camera. They did. Have a look at this crime scene photo. Look closer. That's a Canon PowerShot A620. The references to this camera in Kate's book are as rare as hen's teeth, but there is this fleeting, offhand, rather casual reference to someone else taking it. In a very real sense, the photos on that camera were the most precious thing they had, not only their last memories of their daughter, but by far the best tool to find her. And yet you never, well, I wouldn't say never, you seldom see those pictures of Madeleine in Portugal, especially in the search posters. In the publicity pictures, it's always pictures of her not in Portugal, like this one. And this one, which I believe is taken from home video, taken inside the McCann's home. If it was up to me, I would have used this photo of Madeleine from the get-go. From this photo, you get an accurate sense of the child's height, build, the length of her hair, the color of her hair, and her overall complexion. It's also age appropriate. Do you agree with that? Now, having written several books on this case, I know this photo exists and that it came from the holiday and that it was on their camera, and yet it's teeth-grindingly hard to find online. I mean, this full-length image. Try to search for it yourself. It took me around an hour to find. Meanwhile, all the other photos of Madeleine which don't depict her as she appeared when she disappeared absolutely clog up the search engine. Interesting, isn't it? Another interesting similarity with the Gus Lamont case potentially is sport. Jerry McCann was apparently a big fan of football. On May 3rd, 2019, when I was in Praia de Luz, when I reenacted the so-called abduction, on my way to the apartment, it was about 9:30 at night. The streets of Luz were virtually deserted, but the pubs and restaurants were packed with people watching football. 12 years earlier, it was the same thing because, did you know, Thursday, May 3rd, 2007 happened to be the UEFA Cup semi-final. We also know that Gus Lamont disappeared on AFL final night. Are these events relevant? Well, I'm not going to take it further than that, although there is quite a lot more to say on this particular topic. In any event, I hope you have a wonderful Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you guys next time.